Hi, my name is Phil. I like to talk about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the key statements and actions taken by the British government and discuss the extent to which they may indicate either a desire to seek a genuine, albeit unrealistic, deal with the EU, or if a no deal at the end of 2020 has been the plan all along. But first, if you'd like to stay notified of daily news and politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, there is a school of thought that Boris Johnson, of course, must be going for a soft Brexit, that his large majority would allow him to do that because he can get Parliament to do whatever he wants, and the very boisterous, hard right Brexiteers in the Conservative Party can be nullified. This is what Theresa May wanted to do after all. However, the reasoning is based on the assumption that when the realities of Brexit bite in 2021, remember we're still in the EU now, we're still in the single market, still in the customs union, still following EU rules, still subject to the European Court of Justice, all of the things that the Brexiteers were said were bad. But in 2021, as far as the plan goes, that will not be the case unless Boris Johnson extends the transition period. All the indicators are that he will not. And it's based on the assumption that when this happens, it will be such a disaster that it will be political suicide for him to be the one to have delivered this. But that assumes that Boris Johnson believes that that will be his fate, because everything he's said and done indicates that he is going full-throated for this no-deal Brexit. So the first thing to consider is what happened before last October. So the last Brexit day that was not was October the 31st, 2019. And Boris Johnson was trying very, very hard to take us out, and without a deal as well. Remember, this amended withdrawal agreement only came in at the last moment. Now, it could have been a plan to have done it all along, certainly, but he was doing everything he could, including trying to illegally shut Parliament down so that it couldn't force him to seek an extension in order that he didn't seek an extension. That would have had us from November suffering the effects of a no-deal Brexit, and a general election would then have been certain. Now, if Boris Johnson was of the belief that taking us out without a deal wouldn't harm him politically, because remember, he's not an ideologue like some people are. He just wants power. And remember, he was a firm Remainer at one point, and it was for him, it was a calculation. It's well known that he wasn't sure whether he should back the Remain camp in the Brexit referendum or the Leave camp, and he decided the Leave camp would give him the best chance of becoming Prime Minister in the future when David Cameron left, and it was entirely based on that. So he just wanted to be Prime Minister, and given that he's now Prime Minister, wants to remain as Prime Minister for as long as possible. The indicators are that he believed that a no-deal Brexit wouldn't have cost him politically, even with a general election, once the consequences were known. So, given that there's not going to be a general election for several years now, surely he feels even more emboldened to go for a no-deal Brexit and hopefully deal with some of the consequences with enough time to go before that next general election. The other thing is that he's very, very keen on the US trade deal, which requires the UK not to have a deal with the EU at all. They're mutually exclusive. And if this wasn't obvious by reading the US proposals that were published last February, it was made crystal clear in the documents that were leaked that discussed the high-level discussions between the UK and the US last year, which the Conservatives tried to hide. But when they were leaked, when we got hold of them, the discussions were very much that the British position was that it understood that the Americans were clear that they would not give us our trade deal if we had a deal with the EU. So it's one or the other. The other thing is that Boris Johnson recently has tried to claim that the EU promised him a deal along the lines that he's been arguing for. However, I mean, not only is it impossible to do that, but it was completely at odds with what they were saying publicly. So if Boris Johnson was genuinely of the belief that the EU said, oh yeah, we'll definitely give you this sort of deal, but publicly they're saying completely the opposite, then he should have at that point gone, hang on a minute, no, that's not what you've been telling me. And the other thing is, we have it in black and white what sort of deal. There's no need for like private discussions on what sort of deal they're pursuing. It's in black and white. It was part of the withdrawal agreement. The political declaration sets out the intended deal that both sides want to negotiate. Doesn't mean to say it will bear much relation to the final deal, but it is the intentions. And given that we haven't even started to negotiate yet, that happens next month, then that political declaration should still be both the UK and the EU's position. And you can read it yourself. You can just just look up Brexit political declaration PDF on Google and it'll come right up. And it's nothing like what Boris Johnson is claiming. But, and Boris Johnson has signed it as well. He's signed that political declaration. So basically what he's doing is he's trying to cast aspersions on the EU by saying they said they wanted this sort of deal. No, it's in black and white what sort of deal they wanted. And what sort of deal we said we wanted. The other thing is that he and his ministers have been going into overdrive on the blame recently. Really have ramped it up and very acrimonious. Why would you do that if you're pursuing a good deal? Because there's two factors to that. If you're pursuing a good deal, then there's no need to get the blame in early because you think you're going to get a good deal. Well, there is nothing to blame. In fact, you want the credit. You want to be actually making sure, hang on a minute, I'm responsible for this, by the way. When it goes brilliantly, I'm getting the credit because this is my deal. That's what you would be doing, not trying to play blame. And the other thing is, like when you're trying to negotiate something, it's all happy, smiley faces, isn't it? All smiles for the camera, all, congratulating each other, saying how brilliant each of you are, how well things are going, very productive. That's what you do. You don't start blaming the other side and being unpleasant to them. That would basically be to suggest that they don't care what damage their attitude and behaviour is doing to the negotiations because they don't intend to pursue those negotiations with any seriousness. And when you consider all of those factors together cumulatively, not just individually, they all point to a desire to get a no-deal Brexit. Not just simply a consequence, but an aim. The idea that it could just be a negotiating strategy or be one conceived by someone who has no idea seems to be a diminishing possibility. And it wasn't one that ever seemed likely, but I could understand people's logic in thinking, well, Brexit will be so damaging that of course he doesn't want to be the one to deliver it. So he'll deliver a soft Brexit, tell everyone that he's delivered a hard Brexit, and most people aren't going to know the difference. And that is true, most people wouldn't know the difference, but some would. And it's those some who would that are bankrolling the Tories, and they're also his support base. So of course, they're the ones who actually matter to him, not the majority of the public. And if it was a negotiating strategy, born of a mind who doesn't understand the realities of trade negotiations, then bear in mind he will keep pushing it all year in the belief that there will somehow be a last-minute agreement in December, and that he just doesn't believe that whatever agreement comes up with has to be ratified by every single member state, as well as the Commission, as well as the Parliament having to give it their blessing, which of course can't take place for several months when you think of all those different components. And that would mean we'd be crashing out still, but with Boris Johnson being one of the most surprised people that were crashing out with no deal in 2021. But I think it's fairly clear that he does not want to get a deal with the EU. And it's not just based on what he's doing and what he's saying, because yes, you could argue that that's just an ill-conceived negotiating strategy. But the clincher for me, amongst all of it, is not only is that the direction we're travelling in, but those government records that show that the US have made clear to us that if we have a deal with the EU, we are not getting a deal with them. The deal with the US doesn't benefit Britain, of course, but it does allow him to deliver his complete deregulation of Britain, the removal effectively of the state, other than to protect billionaires. It removes workers' rights, it removes environmental standards, it removes nationalised industries. The NHS would become completely privatised eventually, and even in the interim, it effectively would be, because the NHS would be forced to buy drugs that are available in the US from the US at massively inflated prices, which means, of course, the NHS would not be able to afford as many of them. So treatments would disappear. Some of them you would have to start paying for because they'll just say, well, we can't afford to pay for these treatments, but we understand people need them. So I'll tell you what, we'll subsidise them a little bit. And it'll start off like that, subsidised, bit less subsidy, completely private healthcare. And that's what he wants. And we know that's what he wants because he's said enough times throughout his political career. And the US deal allows him to do that. The EU deal hampers it. So I think it's quite clear that he thinks he can weather the political storm of a no-deal Brexit. If he thought he could do it when there would have been, when he had a minority government and there would have been a general election soon after, it's quite certain that he thinks he can weather it when he's got several years safety net and he's got a large majority as well. So anyway, I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please click the Patreon link for details as well. And until next time, I'll see you later.